still participate. That's not a bad thing.
It's really nice. Definitely a bonus.
So what he's actually saying is you can run, but you can't hide.
That's right. You can run, but you can't hide.
Thanks for those fish, Bob. Those were delicious.
And they were fresh. I'm just going to tell you.
They tasted fresh. They were very good.
Good.
So.
A few votes. This suggests the possibility of Biden overtaking Trump and then putting some distance between himself and Trump. If the trends that we've been talking about for the last couple of hours, the trends that have been established now in dozens.
And you must have your TV running at the same time. So.
Yeah, can you hear it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I that goes to show you how deaf I am because I have to have it up. My kids are telling me, now when you gonna go get hearing aids, Mom? I'm like, I'm not there yet.
Okay. I say we're about 2 minutes out. Morgan, is that about right?
Yeah, that's what I show.
Okay. Okay. Okay, yeah, we'll get started. Steve, good to have you. There may be some technical questions. We surely need some help from you. And I see Randy Sant is also on. We appreciate joining us. Andy, Craig, appreciate that. Council, I was told by Matt that the other department heads are about a phone call away if we need to call somebody in for information. So, but we do have Steve, Golden, Andy on board. And Morgan, I'll leave it up to you to kind of tell us when we're ready to go.
I'm ready to start when you are, Mayor.
Okay, so we're at the 5:30 mark.
Yep, and we're recording and we are streaming to YouTube.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, I want to welcome everybody out to the Roy City Council work session for November 5th, 2020. It's 5:30 p.m. I'd like to also recognize we have Council Member Paul, Council Member Burrell, Council Member Wilson, Council Member Jackson, and Council Member Saxton, all with us tonight. We appreciate you being with us. Obviously, it's an important night, particularly as we look at the nation as we're going through this election process. What an interesting time as we watch this unfold. I'd like, if I can, just read a statement that I've been reading lately and echoing the concerns that I personally have had with the pandemic that's existing within our community. As of the end of November, the last week of November, Weber County had 885 positive cases. That still draws, and it's still growing. Obviously, we're concerned about that. And with that, I'm going to make this comment. I, Mayor Robert Dando, in accordance with State Code Section 52-3-207, 4, have determined that conducting a meeting at the Roy City Council chambers presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who would be present at the City Council chambers. And basis that this determination is that due to the infectious nature and potentially dangerous health effect of contracting the COVID-19 virus, there is not a sufficient space in the council chambers to provide appropriate, safe physical distancing for the safety of individuals who attend. Accordingly, for this date, November 5th, 2008, the meeting will be held electronically without an anchor location. Hope you'll abide with me as we go through this process. I will tell you, at least the latest report suggests is that there will not be a vaccine available probably until January. And as you would expect, there will be critical needs that will be given to those in the medical industry. Those first responders more than likely will get that. and we may not see the general public getting access to that vaccine for some time later. But we do need to kind of watch it. And until we find that there's a safe operation, a safe place, we will continue as best we can through these Zoom meetings. So with that, Council, we do have some discussion items on this special workshop. I'd like then just to go ahead and turn the discussion now for fire interlocal agreement over to Chief Golden. And Chief, go ahead and I think you have some presentation charts you'd like to share with us. Go ahead, Greg.
I do, Mayor, and apologize. This is what my video looks like right now. I don't know what's blocking the screen, so I'm gonna go without video if you don't mind, but I'm gonna share my screen.
Perfect.
And then we'll do a little presentation. It's only got a few slides to basically look at, but overall, I just want to get everybody just understand what the interlocal agreements are about and why they're beneficial and what type of impact basically we have because of what we do with other agencies and why we do it that way. And hopefully that'll be better explained. Interlocal agreements, like I told you on one of the other ones, mutual aid and versus automatic aid. And mutual aid is where the incident commander either on rollout when they see, big a plume of smoke or the incident dictates, they'll actually request for those additional aid or additional alarm. And that delays things considerably, as I talked at another council meeting. So the intent of most of the agreements that we try to get into now are automatic, and the point of the automatic is that it's dispatched right from the 911 call center, unless it switches between like a county call center. But that is just a direct call to those centers, and that those agencies will be dispatched according to the agreement. The key to the agreements and all agreements are if available or in service, and the units when paged will go. And so you get to say up front in the agreement about what type of assets you can commit to these agreements. So if it's typically we don't agree to the entire department, both station 31 and 32. We would just commit to an apparatus or an apparatus and an ambulance, and the rescue is a little different, which I'll try to explain a little bit later. But the overall intent of an agreement is to provide the help that we so necessarily need on those incidents. Staffing being number one, and then the time is the next one, because if you're right on a border with Weber Fire District, for example, or Riverdale, their first in unit will get there, and then the second available one would definitely be coming from us. And that time to have that second unit and that manpower there is vital to basically that fire and everything being mitigated, property being saved or less damage, and people being saved in general. The responses, and I'm going to focus in on just 19, even though some of this data, which the mayor has also done quite a bit of research on here, and I'll pull this, but I'll primarily focus in on 2019. And basically in the last few years, we've been right around 15 calls a day, or about 5,500 calls a year. If you look at Ogden, run around 10,000 calls, and they have 5 stations. That's about 2,000 calls per station. We are on track to hit about 6,000 this year, and 85% of those calls are EMS, and that's huge. So 15 to 17 calls per day, and those can run from anywhere from you get halfway down the road and you get canceled to full on cardiac arrest, or auto accident requiring extrication, something to basically 0 to 100 fairly quick. Fire is about 15% of the call, and those are broke down into quite a few different categories, as I'll try to cover just some of them here tonight. The key thing to note here, and I'll explain a little bit more, is our EMS calls, 85%. Now, mind you, we don't get to bill for all 85% of those the calls that we run on, but they are reimbursable. And that is reimbursable when somebody gets put in the ambulance or they get put into another ambulance and that rescue and that paramedic is on board on that ambulance. So we get that money reimbursed to it. And here, just a slight thing on the paramedic on board, agreement that we have with Weber County. And by the way, we just renegotiated that, and we're going to get an increase starting in January for next year's contract. So very successful with the amount of service we provide. We were able to show that we needed an increase in the amount that we get. But that paramedic aboard is a county asset. Get reimbursed. We get county money from that, plus the asset of the vehicles and some of the equipment that go on it. And then we by in turn provide the paramedics to a certain level to maintain that resource and availability. So huge asset to us, different than in pretty much any. Davis County is probably the closest one, and they've got about less than 2 years before they're out of the Davis County is out of the paramedic business. So the way the paramedic aboard is ran here in this county is a very effective, and it actually allows for some good response and good coverage of the county. But once again, it's a county asset, but it is here in Roy and would go here to Roy, but we can easily be up in the North County or up towards Morgan on accidents or calls if needed. Davis County, this kind of, a lot of the questions came out of that local agreement piece that included was Davis County. And part of that thing is we are, I threw out some numbers about what we did into Clinton and over a period of time, but just in 17 to 19, just in the calls and the aid given or received into Davis County as a whole, we only had 97 calls specifically in there for requests for aid. And 50% of those are EMS. And you look at 50% of those, there's about 17 to 20 that are BLS transfers, where Davis Hospital would call up and ask for us to transfer in that time and not go through Weber 911. So it used to be a little bit different until we got it all agreed to go through Weber 911. So 50% of those were that way. And we would just send an ambulance or the rescue into Davis County. So we would give 86 of those calls were given and 11 of those were received. Now, if you go back on structural fires, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but that was really interesting to see those numbers of incidents that we had over that period of time from what Weber 911 had. And so there's some conflict in data which you'll see on some of the calls, because Davis County might have actually asked us for something and Weber did not actually record it and just recorded it as a mutual aid and didn't actually attach this to it. So there are some variables that go into those. The next few slides that I have are the ones that the Merit put out, but I want to focus specifically on the ones that are specifically responses within Roy City. And if you go on 5,500 calls, and then you look at, we did 2,800 in 2019, that's a little bit of a different, but there's a lot of things that are filtered out of here that basically dispatch, and if you run down the numbers, there's like 4 calls to this, 4 calls to that, 20 calls to this. So it's a lot of data to crunch. But overall, the difference that I want you to see is the medical response and the fire. And the fire numbers are fairly accurate. It's the medical or what category they fall into, other or things like that they'll fall into. But it is 85%. That's pretty close to 85%, 15% split overall just into Roy City. And those ones can expand quite a bit as we go through. The medical response, as you go through the medical responses, out of those, you see the difference in the little bit of the difference in the number here. But this breaks down just in the top 6 that the Merit actually went through. And once again, the Merit went through and itemized every single one of these calls. So this number that you see here is pretty accurate on what you're seeing as far as the number of our calls that we have. And these are just the top 6, and they're spread out throughout the whole, and there's 30 something different categories plus subcategories of those. So these are just the top 6 that we had, and they vary quite a bit, as you can see. The fire responses, however, are even more complicated. Out of the 375, you got fire alarms. Those are typically just ladder or the engine 31 or engine 32 that would respond to those fire alarms. And then if they needed other assets to help because the alarm was activated by a smoke or something like that, then they would call in additional assets. Most of these, to include these hazmat one here, this 15 number, this could be just something as simple as an auto accident that actually spilled fuel and antifreeze out on the thing. And we just do some littered, some Absorbol and actually take care of it, clean up ourselves. So it could be something as simple as that. And the other one is gas that you see here. We tend to have a lot of those. We had quite a few of those after the earthquake and the little aftershocks and stuff. We had a lot of gas ones, and those tend to keep our numbers up a little bit. But the 57, I want to come back to right here on the structural fire. That's the one where when you talk about assets that are needed, and I used the Midland in 1900 fire that had all those cars and those businesses that were affected down there. That is actually a multi-agency, started in Weber County, ended up taking the businesses in Roy, and we needed every number of assets there. So we had, I think, 7 agencies there helping them with that fire in some way, shape, or form, just because of the fire load. And because of all those assets, we were able to keep that down to a minimum. So 57, and out of those, we call those when you show up and there's a lot of flamer and stuff, you get all these other assets rolling, but you can either slow them down or you can declare a working incident and or a second or third alarm, depending on how big the fire is when you show up. And we'll talk about working incidents in just a minute. So interlocal agreements. This is inside and outside of Roy itself. And once again, the 375 fire and the 1679. I don't necessarily want to focus in on this number of the 1679 because those have the capability of being reimbursed to us every time we go out on a medical call. Sprained ankle, seizure, anything like that, diabetic call, no matter what it is, we're going to go help no matter what. And if we transport, they want us to transport them, we will transport them to the hospital of their choice. And but the caveat to that is we will also send them a bill. And then the ability to pay is also worked out through the different means that we have is on top of that. So let's focus in on this 375, or just try to think of that number as a whole. And these fire responses, when you think about it, when we respond to other entities, it's basically Ogden is our number one, then Riverdale, which I think that one makes sense. Ogden may be surprising, but really when you think about it, we send a ladder or ambulance or a rescue into Ogden quite a bit to help with different fires that they have. And then this Weber Fire District, just because we border these entities, that's why we end up serving them quite a bit. And then basically the EMS ones are there, and that's the first responder type agreement as well. Whenever we send something out, it could be just us going with an engine, or we're going and their engine's there and we're providing an ambulance or rescue. So that also, once again, reimbursable on the EMS side of the house. Okay, aid received on the fire side of the house. These 3 cities are neighbors basically, and they're higher. When I first looked at these numbers and went back and confirmed them, I would have thought Riverdale and Weber would have been a little higher. In 2020, it is a little higher in those numbers, but more so in Weber than Riverdale. So we're still on track for about the same fire EMS responses into those entities as a whole. And then rescue, just a reminder, anytime we go out and rescue, those numbers could add an additional 500 calls into our responses because it's a Weber County asset. Numbers are a little bit different added into those numbers in general in Weber County. EMS ones, as I said, the 2019, it goes a little different, and it actually kind of matches up where we're trending also this year. Is Weber's our number one, then Riverdale, Ogden, South Ogden, Washington Terrace, and Uinta. And those are high enough to basically say, hey, we're helping these entities out quite a bit. Rescue averages about 1,000 calls a year over this time frame, and they're on track to basically bust that again this year. And about half of those calls, surprisingly, are outside of Roy. But I mean, they can literally be up at north Weber County and then come back into Ogden or South Ogden on a call after a transport. So they are closest resource and can go anywhere because of that. The only place we won't see them go is up into by Pineview up in the Upper Valley. And I thought it was interesting that we're about 50%. In 2020, I don't think we're that high, but last year we were about 505, I think, last year. Reimbursable calls. I say reimbursable calls, but this number is set by the state. That was one of the resolutions I put up a couple months ago. They set a new established rate to include what the mileage, per mile, and also the rate for both a BLS or an advanced level as well as a paramedic level cost that we can actually submit for billing. Basic life support is BLS. Transfers, we have agreement with IASIS or the Roy substation, Davis Roy campus down here, emergency room. We have a agreement with them to do transfers, both BLS to ALS. And that also is up for renegotiation. Hopefully we'll have that negotiated before the end of the year as well. And then ALS on the paramedic aboard charge, where even if we take the rescue and we hop on somebody else's apparatus, we still get a reimbursable amount for that paramedic unit we have. So it is actually there. And those actually come in as our revenue when we go through the billing above and beyond what the paramedic contract actually gives us. And then overall, fire calls themselves, just as we've talked about, and I think everybody understands, fire calls are not reimbursed. And you have 57 calls that we actually give support out in the fire side of the house. That's structural calls. The other ones, we can go out and help with other things, but 9 times out of 10, they'll cancel us before we even get close because it's not that bad. You'll hear a working incident before you even kind of get down the road. So you know whether or not it's going to be a time intensive type of a deal and an asset intensive. The one thing that we haven't done in Roy, but this actually kind of comes up, is the wildland or urban interface fires that actually are out there. If, for example, we had that request down to Saratoga Springs, requests come down to send assets out of state through other means that I have access to. And if you do it, it ends up being dependent on what you send, and also the individuals and the vehicles have to meet the requirements that are requested. So the engine type has to be the type. Is it a brush type, or is it just an engine they need? Do they need 2 or 4 people minimum? Do they need medical qualifications, so on and so forth? And then after they meet that time requirement, and it could be as little as 8 hours, and depend on if it starts right out on federal land, it can be as minimum as 2 or 3. And you can start getting reimbursed at an hourly rate for those assets that you send. We do not have the certifications in here to be doing any wildland stuff, but urban interface is kind of what we can do here. It's just like protecting exposures and structural. So it is one of those ones that maybe in the future, as we get, we're in a younger type of a department right now. And as we get changes, maybe we'll look at that a little bit more. Just to give you an example, a rate for an engine that they're sending out of state right now is about just over $4,000 an hour, and it can be used for 8 to 12 hours a day. So, and that pay, then also you have staffing that you send as well that gets reimbursed. So, last slide. I apologize for taking so long. We said we had 375 calls inside Roy City, where basically they came in and said we needed their help. Of those, 57 of those were what we called structural fires. So they will send Ogden, Riverdale, Weber, sometimes Clinton, depending on where the fire is in Roy, and they'll be called on the first alarm. And the first alarm is set to give us at least 15 to 20 people for a structural fire. So those assets are there. Each department normally does not, other than Ogden and Weber, and they need multiple stations to make that number up. So it depends on where things are at. We only have 10 and 11 with the chief officer that we can actually provide on a structural fire. And if it's a business or commercial, you need to start with that first alarm, not working incident or second alarm, with 20. And so a good example of that is what we had down at that crossroads of Midland in 1900, where we had seven entities that were actually there working together. And I think we had over 30 something firefighters, to include newly addition Hill Air Force Base was there as well. So that first alarm working incident, basically, I see smoke and fire when I'm arriving, and I declared it a working incident. Only 13 of those, so just over 20% of those are working incidents. And that means I need every single person that is already called to that. And then I'll make a further size up on arrival, whether I need a second alarm. And that second alarm would give me X number of other engines. And these are already played into the piece. And that staffing is so critical to that. And if you look at just our surrounding entities about what they can provide, most entities can't provide 20 firefighters that fast without this type of support and this type of agreement. And you're looking at, out of the 375 calls that we had, 13 of them being where we did need that help. And those ones where they were needed. And then as soon as we were able to release them, we actually released them and sent them back to their city. And that's kind of what we try to do here. And if and when possible, we try to leave at least an engine in service during that time frame as well, so that we still have a first response entity within the city of Roy for that time frame as well. And then the time is the last piece. I mean, all the stations are built strategically located, geographically figured and calculated where the best place to put them so that they meet that time requirement. And then the best staffing is, it can be argued left and right about how many staffing you need to have, but to have a local station show up with 4 people or more to be able to start effecting rescue and doing some basic firefighting techniques, and why the rest of the responders actually get there is essential, and that makes a big difference. So, and then last piece, if you didn't have these type of agreements, this type of support, we'd lose more property, and we'd have a little bit more risk. And it is better to do these type of things with these agreements, and the cost is very minimal when you look at 13 of the 375 that came into Roy were used for long periods of time. So I'm going to open that up to questions. I didn't want to get into too many slides or add a bunch of other slides with the data that I have, because there's so much out there, and I could. Well, statistics, I mostly can tweak it just a little bit to make it my favor. I didn't want to do that. So I just wanted to basically throw this up here and just say, this is why we do interlocals. This is why it's important. And oh, by the way, if you don't have the asset or the need or the personnel, you can always say no. I think want to drive that one home as well. Any questions?
Council, any questions, comments? Okay, let me ask you, Chief, let me just ask you a couple of things. When you talked about the aid given and received to Davis County, and we indicated in 2017 to 2009, there were 97 calls. You indicated 50% of those were EMS. Is there any reimbursement at all that the city gets for anything going into Davis County?
Not other EMS. So if we respond in EMS, like for example, those calls that we responded in, we just sent an ambulance. And if we use our ambulance to take anybody to the hospital or anything like that, then yes, we would get reimbursed for that.
Okay. So the reimbursement would be 50% of any EMS that goes into Davis County.
Yeah, about 50% of the calls, we have the possibility of being reimbursed for those, yes, so.
Okay. And just a couple other clarifications on the charts. I just need to make sure I understand a little better. You said in one of the charts, and I apologize, let me just go to it. You talked about rescue, and we received nearly 1,000 calls a year dealing with rescue, where 50% of those are outside of Roy. Is the rescue also an EMS reimbursement?
Yes, they actually are staffed with paramedics, Mayor. So they actually would get, if it was just them on the ambulance, we would get the full reimbursement of the paramedic fee. And if we just hopped on at another entity, then we would actually just get the paramedic separation, which is, I think, right around $500 extra dollars plus whatever equipment and drugs that we would use.
Okay, so rescue and EMS, Roy City is getting reimbursed. What appears to be fire, we don't. Okay, and I guess really what it comes down to, Council, is this question. And I don't want to make this to be a discussion. And by the way, we're not doing a decision tonight. This is more just entertaining any questions. But it really comes down to this issue. I don't want you to walk away indicating this is a public safety issue. You can't put a dollar amount literally on life. I mean, you can say what we think, but the fact is you can't. And so you can see the importance of this. But I think the question you have to ask yourself would be is it how much of the service we're providing, particularly fire, because it looks like everything else is reimbursable, how much of the fire support we're providing to outside agencies, which is non-reimbursable, versus what we get back from those other agencies or those other cities into Roy. And I think the evidence suggests is that there's a lot more that Roy provides outside of Roy than what we get back in to Roy from other agencies or services. And so there's a cost to that. I think the chief made a comment that simply says it's a minimal cost, and I don't know what those numbers are, but there is a cost associated with that, and the issue would be is Roy City residents are paying that cost. Now, one last piece, and I think, Matt, you can help me on this one. If in fact one of our vehicles is damaged when it's deployed outside of Roy City, correct me if I'm wrong, if it's over $50,000, our insurance company will in fact pay for that damage. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. If the damage is less than $50,000, then we have to basically absorb that cost. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's an option that we can purchase if we want to, but we choose not to because it's $50,000 a year for that insurance.
Yeah. So the cost.
So yes.
Yeah. So the thing I'd like you to just ponder as you think about this issue as we decide what we're going to do, hopefully in our next city council meeting on this interlocal agreement, is in fact, if we lose a fire truck to an accident outside of Roy City, Chief, conservatively, how long would it take for us to get a replaced fire truck ordered and brought into Roy City for a replacement?
If we went new, it could be a year or more. If we just wanted to lease something, we could probably get it within 30 days. But,
okay.
You know, and that's the other thing, Mayor, on that piece right there, that Saratoga Springs one, we were down, our ladder truck was out of service at that time. They were asking for an engine. You know, there was multiple houses and families in danger. You know, your heartstrings are tugging, but I had to say right off the bat without any consult to anybody, because they wanted the decision right away. I just said, we cannot send anybody or an apparatus for the same thing you said. I can't risk another apparatus being out of service or breaking down while it goes down there or even comes back.
And so, and if you read the interlocal agreement, one of the interesting components of that would be is that agreement talks about service in Farmington and Kaysville, which is a little further than we typically would normally see versus going into Riverdale. Now, I don't want to make this tough for you. I just want you to look at all sides of this issue.
Right.
But with the approval of that interlocal agreement, Council, you're going to either go ahead and by that decision, give the city the authority to go ahead and deploy on these requirements, much like we've done in the past, or not. And I'm not asking you to make the decision relative whether it's a life and death issue. That's not it. If the real issue here is that this is an issue on finances and Roy residents having to pay that bill, then maybe the conversation we ought to be having at some point would be is, should we try to find some way to negotiate with our broader community about some type of reimbursement to those cities who are providing more services outside than what they're providing and getting from other organizations inside. I'm just concerned that I just don't want the Roy City residents to have to pay the bill on services provided to other municipalities. We should have at least some type of compensation equally back to Roy City. And in many cases, that's not the case. So please,
Mayor,
Diane.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to ask in regards to the graph on the Roy Fire Department responses. It had the total and then it broke out all of the responses for the calendar year for the different cities like Morgan, Mountain Green. I believe it was the last graph. Is there a chance that you could take a look at that, Chief?
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Okay, so it talks about the total being 375. Now, and then it talks about, and it breaks it down with the blue being, Ogden, Riverdale, but those add up to 528. So I was just wondering, in regards to that, is the 375, is that just calls somehow within Roy then? And the other blue, maybe explain that for me.
So yeah, these ones here, like I said, when you look at that and you go back even to the other slide, I says the numbers are off, and it's just you're adding up. Okay, by agency, you might have one and a list of the spreadsheet that you get from Weber 911.
I see. Okay.
And so these ones here are added up based off of that calendar year for those responses into Roy. But yeah, like I said, I just picked the three ones, but you are correct. The numbers are off. And if the other slide, and I want to say it was get to exactly which one it was. It was the slide 5 when it had the 2435. That one was kind of also off compared to the 1679 that we'd been using. So just kind of want to, yeah, the data is off in some of its numbers. Yes, ma'am.
And then on that same graph, if you go to the end where it says Weber Fire District, and I was just wondering how Weber Fire District, the 686 responses that we have outside, again, though, we still don't get any reimbursement from that because the only reimbursement we get from Weber area is, again, paramedic and EMS, correct?
Yeah, and this one here, the blue is actually fire calls. And so that would be your medical calls that we would have been called into the district.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, good questions. Thank you. Anybody else have any comments, questions they'd like to ask Chief? Matt?
I just have one last comment. And this just came to mind. It was about a week ago, Craig was texting, we were texting back and forth on Saturday. And he mentioned that Ladder 31 was down. It was having some mechanical issues. When we took the breakfast around of the employees, you've seen it in the bays there. Ambulance 32 was down and Engine 31 was down. So both big fire trucks from 31 was down. The reason why I want to share this with you is because sometimes these relationships with these other agencies, North Davis Fire District sent a truck up here that we could use for a week or so just to keep us going. Sometimes these relationships are important. I can't put a value to how much a lease on a fire truck was, but sometimes these relationship goes both ways too. So I want you to take that in consideration. Although I do understand where you're coming from about the financial end of it. I think a big point is that the guys, they like to take care of each other, and it's not really safe for these firefighters to go into a house that's burning down without some help. So I don't want to, and you mentioned it, Mayor, before, I don't want to put a financial value on a life, but we're also talking about the lives of our employees that we have to take care of as well.
Yeah, and council, if you really look at the data, there's an argument to have a serious conversation about how consider a district, and because they're really acting like a district, where they're going, how they're supporting it, and you don't have to go too far to see what how districts work and how all the communities in that particular area support that simple district. So this is interesting. You need to ponder it. I just want to make sure that you have all the information, all the facts. You're going to have an interlocal agreement. I would like to bring up on the 17th for your vote. Does anybody have a problem with bringing that forward on the 17th for a discussion and a vote?
I just have a question too.
Please,
After
Ann,
Jan, go ahead, Jan, you go first.
please.
So I have a question about equipment. Are there pieces of equipment that we have that others don't have, or vice versa, that are needed for specifically a structural fire?
All the apparatus pretty much have the same or similar type of equipment on them. And also different hose can be used, nozzles can be used, tools can be used. We may have newer or better saws than another entity, but for the most part, everybody's stuff is pretty much the same.
Everybody has similar. So it's not like we have equipment that they would always call on us for because we have better equipment.
That's correct.
Or vice versa.
Unless you talk about the ladder truck, Chief.
Yeah, yes, true. When you talk about a ladder has to have so much length on the ladders, and it still has to have so many ground ladders on top of the ladders, as well as being able to pump but not necessarily carry enough water to do an initial pump or operation.
So I just had a question. Is it different? So if you go on a call to Roy, or you go on a call outside of our district, and by chance somebody runs a red light and smashes into our fire truck and they die, do we get sued different? I mean, I was just curious about that. If that's different inside our city than outside our city.
It's the insurance covered no matter where you're driving.
No matter where you go.
I understand it, whether you drive in the state. The license for the ambulances are a state license, same with the vehicles.
Okay.
Okay, good
Question,
conversation.
How often do we renew these? Are they a yearly renewal of the agreement, or is it longer than that?
So most of them are 5 years, which really is kind of, I think they should be, 10 years and reviewed annually. And at that point, if things change within any area, you just bring that change up and either cancel or ask for it to be amended. But most are 5 years right now.
They have opt-out provisions too.
That's correct.
Okay.
Those.
Well, I agree that we need to cover each other's back whenever we need somebody, or ever we can help somebody. Like the mayor said, there's no price you can put on the human life. And I know that the firefighters all, are really close knit, and it's a union, and they all like to help each other out. So I think it's a good thing to have.
Yeah, and I think that's my job, to be a good steward of the money and the equipment that we have, and be able to say, yes, we can support, or no, we can't support. And to have that option built in there. We have this agreement will be built into the CAD, but the good thing about these is we can still say, like you said, Farmington or Kaysville, calls up and they say, that's a long way. We got an issue. Yeah, we got a ladder in service, but that's our only one. Our engine 31 may be out of service, so we'll have to say no to that
Right.
request.
And that decision is up to you to always make, right?
Yeah, or whoever the chief officer is on duty at that point. So yeah, it would be mine. A captain should not make that decision. It should come back a phone call to me.
Chief, can I ask one more question? So as I'm hearing the mayor possibly advocating for a negotiation of reimbursement, is that something that's ever talked about or ever discussed?
So those areas that I mentioned about like a wildland, or you get sent out on a grass fire, like I had mentioned down, Farmington's had a couple, Layton had a couple this last year. Ogden's had a few up on the bench. And usually we just provide anything Ogden or in this area here, we usually just provide an ambulance and just support as needed there, or send a brush truck with 2 people on it, and that's it. And those ones can be reimbursed if we go beyond a time frame and the BLM or forestry take over the call. And yes, they can. And yes, I would pursue it if that time frame got exceeded. And then we would get reimbursed for how many hours we had worked on that fire.
So maybe I'm misunderstanding, Chief, but even like on a structural fire, say within Riverdale or South Ogden or Ogden City, none of that is reimbursable.
None of that is reimbursed. No, that is all assets that are provided to within these agreements.
Okay, but is that ever considered? I mean, would there ever be a consideration for a possible reimbursement on that?
If you had certain things, the other ones that you can get reimbursed if you go in and it actually has some sort of hazmat or something, you know, the gas line or something, you have something damaged or equipment, you would get reimbursed for whatever you used on that. That's it. Nothing else.
I understand that that is how it currently is, but would they ever be open to that, I guess, is what I'm asking. Not is it in the current interlocal agreement or in the past interlocal, but what I'm hearing, what I thought I heard the mayor saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, is that he's wondering if that could be in the future part of that negotiation.
Yeah, I haven't worked any of that in over 30 years doing in fire service within.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless you go into something, an agreement like a district, like the mayor had mentioned, then everybody cost shares at that point.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for answering that.
But we're the same as every other city. They don't get reimbursed neither.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah, it's just, it really comes down to this discussion, which says, is there a fair and equitable distribution of service? If we go into cities 10 times a year, do we get a fair 10 times back into Royse City to compensate for our investment? The answer to that question is no. So it just is what it is. So, and it's large part because we're a big player. Ogden's a big player in this community. Roy's a big player because we have assets. But here's the key, and I'll just use this analogy. I have a 2005 350Z. That 350Z has 40,000 miles on it. So if you kind of calculate how many miles I put on that Z every year, it's not a lot. And to this date, I've replaced one battery and I've replaced one set of tires. If I was to use that normally and get 12,000 miles on that every year, and you calculate how long I've had that, I would have probably replaced more than just tires and batteries. I may have replaced the car. So the point I want to suggest is that there is wear and tear every time those big vehicles roll out of the station. Regardless of whether it's internal to Roy or external, there is a wear and tear. And when you think about that ladder truck that we just purchased, the latest one, I believe, I think that was a $700,000 bill that Royse City residents paid for. And it will be used, and it will basically be used to the point where it will have to be replaced. The question we have to ask is, with no reimbursement, the question you have to think about would be is, could that asset been kept online longer had we not had that asset used for everybody else? Or at least, could that asset basically generated some revenue that we could have put into the fund to go to the point of being available to provide reimbursement to purchase a new one? That's a hard question. All I'm asking basically, and this may be a conversation that Matt and I and Chief will have, is to simply says, maybe we need to open that dialogue up and have a conversation that says we need fair and equal restitution or reimbursement for services provided if we're not getting that same service in kind. And that's all I'm saying. I just don't want Royse City residents to have to pay taxpayer dollars, okay, to provide services to other cities when they really may not need to. So let's think about those questions. Got some good answers. Chief, thanks for the input. And then we'll sit down and see if we can't come up with a discussion in our next meeting. Diane, you had a question.
One question in regards to that, Mayor and Chief. I noticed that every time there is a transport for the paramedics, the fire engine comes. In my profession, you know, I have an opportunity for that occasionally. And that actually, I've always wondered why we would need to increase the wear and tear and take the staffing away from that. How does that fit into this picture? And why does the fire truck need to come when it is a transport of a patient from a clinic or from a home or something like that?
So that varies. When the call comes in, sometimes depending on what they're coded at, they get an alpha through echo code. And an alpha basically would just be an ambulance. But if they go Bravo, Charlie, or Delta, you'll get an ambulance and a fire engine for Bravos and Charlies. And if it goes Delta, or even in some Charlies or Delta, then you get the rescue ambulance and a fire engine. And that's it, when it goes up in that, it goes up in severity, and it just like a fire incident, you need that many people to work a cardiac arrest, for example, or to do a traumatic injury, to do a vehicle extrication, things of that sort, and patient care. So that's why they go in tandem, because we only have 2 people on an ambulance, so they can only do the minor type stuff. If they need more help to include lifting and hauling, then they need at least 2 more. And our average, most of the time, we just keep 2 people on a ladder or an engine. So they work as a 4-man crew, but they're on separate vehicles.
And because we don't have any smaller vehicle, then they have to take the fire engine?
Yeah, and like I said, if it's an auto accident, then you also have to cover for potential fires, battery issues, hazmat, and that's what the engine does. You'll see them when they have those type of hazards. You'll see them in their turnout gear, and they'll have hose pulled, and then they have a different role versus actually the ambulance role.
Okay, I'll talk to you about that because, my experience, that would be interesting for me because, okay, thank you.
And what I really love to do, and sorry I've taken so much time tonight, I apologize. What I really want to do is try to do like a kind of a fire education thing where you actually can come out and actually get hands-on and actually put the gear on and actually do a extrication with some of our tools, do some of that stuff. And I would love to do that with the council and anybody else that we could invite and actually come out and actually spend a day doing that. Hopefully we have that time maybe before it gets too far and the COVID actually is over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
you,
Chief, thank you for the input. Okay, great comments. Okay, council, next discussion item. This is the proposed mixed use for the downtown district. We wanted a workshop to go ahead and discuss this, kind of get your thoughts on some things. As you may be aware of, first, I want to make sure it's clear we are not making a decision tonight. This is a workshop to answer questions, make your comments, whatever you feel comfortable with. So no decision tonight, but I think it's an opportunity to discuss this. One other thing I want to share with you is that during this period since our last meeting, the city went ahead and posted on the website, and some other people were engaged in this to bring public awareness to this document out. Matt and I asked Morgan, since she was collecting, we asked specifically if people would go ahead and send comments into the admin email address, and in doing so, Morgan was able to start collecting some of that information for us. And so with that, I believe she sent with the packet some of those comments. However, I wanted her to kind of summarize some of the input that she has and kind of help us in this process. So Morgan, if you'll take a moment and give us some ideas about what you received from the public.
I can do that. I'm just going to pull up this slide. Everyone can see this. Really quickly, I will go through what we got as far as feedback goes. So we had, like the mayor had said, we had posted on our website as well as on several social media platforms. We posted on Facebook, I believe, on 4 different website pages. And now this doesn't want to move to the next slide. Hold on a second. There we go. So Roy City Corporation's page, which I run, made 3 different posts regarding tonight's meeting, as well as pointing people to the document on the website. There were no comments made on any of those posts. They were shared several times, I believe, in a total of 12 times they were reshared. The mayor made a post on the Roy City community page and on the Citizens of Roy page. And then one of our residents made a post on 3 different pages, the Roy City community page, Roy Utah Real Talk, as well as Citizens of Roy. Between all of those posts, we did get quite a bit of feedback. I believe there were over 70 people engaged in conversation there. What happened was there was a lot of conversation going back and forth between people. So I tried to just get it down to how many people actually made a comment. Of those comments, we did get quite a few that were discussing 5600, and that's, I believe, a separate discussion than what we wanted to engage tonight with the construction going on 5600 as well as the infrastructure there. So to kind of generalize what I could find and what some of the common threads that were discussed on Facebook, as well as the emails that we received, like the mayor had said, we did put out this admin at Roy Utah and asked people to submit their thoughts or concerns about this. Of the Facebook pages, all of those that had actual comments on them, none of them were Roy City owned. So those aren't part of our official public record. So I'll give you the data that I got from them, but they're not part of our official record. Whereas the emails that we received are part of our record. And so I will go over exactly who sent those in. We did get 12 emails in specific. All 12 of them at one point or another in their email stated that they were in favor of these changes and in favor of mixed use. So to kind of go over some of the feedback we got, some of the concerns that we had, that we saw, there was a lot of concern and discussion about property taxes. People don't want their property tax increased again. We did get 2 comments discussing property rights should be stuck with the owner. So if an owner owns something, they should be able to do with it what they want. We did also get a comment regarding the city looking at other avenues to save money. I'm just generalizing some of these just to not, I'm not going to read their exact words just because they were on Facebook. As well as I did get a comment as well on Facebook that said businesses don't utilize mixed use. They don't utilize that kind of space, at least in that person's experience. We got a couple of comments, 2 comments suggesting we need better infrastructure. And we did have 3 separate people suggesting they do not want more apartments in Roy. And then I believe there were 2 comments regarding the space is unaffordable. So some of the retail space, or excuse me, retail business space is unaffordable. Of the positive feedback that I received on Facebook and through the comments and the emails, we had over 10 people comment and suggest on Facebook that Roy City's downtown needs to be revitalized. And then we had over 7 comments in emails that all specifically said that Roy City's downtown needs to be revitalized. We had 7 comments that suggested we would like to bring more businesses into Roy on Facebook, and over 7 of the emails specifically suggested that we need to bring more businesses into Roy. We did get quite a few, over 5 comments on Facebook suggesting more sit-down restaurants or any restaurants. And I lost track of how many actual suggestions for which restaurants they would like in Roy. But I know that there were several of those as well. And then kind of to summarize, or the last one that I noticed, we had a lot of people in favor of a higher sales tax revenue so that people aren't needing to pay an increase in their property taxes. So that was said over 5 times on Facebook, as well as over 5 of the emails that we received. And then just kind of in conclusion, I'm just going to go over who exactly submitted an email, just so it's on public record, if that's all right with everyone. So Stacy O'Toole Katie Gerard Nelson, a Darren Albright, Robert Spielman, a Rebecca Bassett, a Diane Mayer, a Craig Parr, Tyne and Cindy Trimble, Craig and Debbie Gordon, Cody Flores, and then Glenda Moore and Janelle Hulbert. All of them suggested and were in favor of this. And then all of these emails I did forward to you. I know we had a couple of mix-ups with our emails this week. So if you haven't received them, 8 of these were sent out with the packet, whereas the rest of them I didn't get until today. So those all were forwarded as well to you. Are there any questions for me?
Hey, council, any questions? Okay, let's, thank you, Morgan. Okay, great rundown. Now, Steve is on, and so Steve's here. If you have any technical questions, now that you reviewed the document, anything that Steve might be able to provide in terms of clarification on what this Chapter 13 mixed-use document is about.
Mayor, before they asked Morgan, did you also get the one from Katie? Oh,
Garrett.
Garrett Nelson?
Yeah, that's right.
Katie, yeah, she was the second name I read.
Okay,
I'm sorry. I said Katie Gerard Nelson, sorry.
No, that's fine. That's probably Gerard is probably the right one.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Council, thoughts?
Lots. I have questions. I
Perfect.
don't know if we're to that point, but when we are, I'd like to be able to ask them and share what I found out over this past week. So is it that time?
Here's what we've got going. This is a workshop. I will indicate you, we do have 5 people standing by who have an interest in making comment to this, but this is yours. You can make comments. You can basically ask questions. We want to make sure that you have a good exchange of information here.
Well, then let's let the public, I would think, go first, so we get a feel.
Mayor, or whoever is leading the discussion, Mayor, Steve, I'm not really sure, but is there a way that we can not take the whole elephant at a time? Is there a way that we can say we're taking public comment on this specific issue? Because I think it becomes overwhelming and we can't really disaggregate all the information and we can't synthesize all the information because we have such a big elephant to eat. So if we could somehow categorize some of those and work through those independently, as opposed to try to look at the whole thing and then we go back and forth on so many issues that we can't really focus on specific areas. Now, I don't know if that addresses what your experience is, Brian or Diane or Anne or Joe. I don't know that, but I think we get so caught in the weeds of this huge issue that we cannot focus and move in one direction. We've got to be able to somewhat categorize and then make a decision on that or look at that and say, okay, I think we're done with that issue. And now we're ready to move on to another. Now we may have to come back to it because it may interface. That's my question. And I think it would make it a much more simplistic process rather than trying to look at the whole thing at once. That's my, and maybe I'm too simplistic of mind. I don't know that. I'm asking that.
Well, okay, and Steve, please weigh in on this. I think it's a good conversation point. One could say that there are basically 5 components to this unit. One of them deals specifically is the building height. And so if you want to discuss then is when the subcommittee got together and says there was some concerns associated with the 12-story building, and the subcommittee come back and says, we're going to reduce that down, then I think that we could have a good conversation that says, are you okay with a 20 feet over the current requirement in some limited area in Roy?
And then I think we take comment on that, Mayor. And
Take comment from who?
from whoever wants to comment on it, whether it be us, whether it be our public, and say we're going to limit it to that right now.
Well,
Because-
okay. Steve, you're gonna have to help me with this here a little bit, because literally, if you broke that into five major sections, and I think we can talk about parks, we could talk about height of buildings, we can talk about mixed use. I'm trying to think of the other two that's in there. And put public comment on that. This thing is going to be a 6-8 month ordeal, Jan.
And to me, for our public to be well informed and well vetted, it's going to take some time, because
So
they
you're
don't feel
suggesting-
well informed.
You're suggesting with that comment, then the last 2 years was not enough time.
I'm suggesting we haven't been able to categorize and make sure that our public understands it, because it's too broad. It has been way too broad. That's my experience.
Go ahead, Diane.
I'd like to mention that when you talk about 2 years, actually, when it comes right down to it, we had one work session, I believe in April, kind of a partial work session. And then this is really our only other work session. And so, even though maybe 2 years has gone by, unfortunately, we haven't had the opportunity to go through each of those areas, like Jan was mentioning. And
You say that, Diane, but you've had the document since the beginning of the year. If you wanted to, you could have read it. You could have asked questions. I seriously think we're to the point we're beating a dead horse. You've had as much time as anybody to work through this, even though there was a committee set to work through this. That didn't recuse every one of you from working through it on your own, talking to people, getting input, getting feedback. I respectfully deny the fact that you say you haven't had time to work on it. You've
did I
had
say
plenty of
that?
time to work
I don't
on it.
think I said that, Joe. I believe I said we haven't had a work session together as a group. I don't know how many hours you spent in that, and if this is the time to bring that up, but
I spent plenty of hours going
Okay.
through it.
Well, I'll tell you, for 6 weeks, I spent 14 to 16 hours a day. And for the last 2 weeks, since we've had the revised version, I've spent anywhere from 6 to 8 hours, 3 days a week. So
Yeah,
I don't
and
think that was my
unfortunately-
comment. My comment was,
unfortunately,
we haven't
Some
had a
of that
work
time
session.
that we spent doing it is because you, Diane, went out on your own and created a survey that was one-sided, that if we could have worked together as a council, we could have got a lot farther ahead, but yet we wasted so much time because you chose to do a survey which is out of character for a council member on your own.
All right. Well, did you talk to
Let me
each-
offer some
Okay.
thoughts here. Okay. First thing is that I'm not sure. It sounds like, Diane, with your comment is you've put a lot of insight and read through this document. I'm sensing what you're looking for in terms of time. And Jan, help me with this, because you introduced this concept. Is that now what you'd like to do is say, let's take a piece of this and let's discuss it among ourselves and do what, and then decide whether or not we like the building height or we don't like the building height. Is that how you want to approach this?
I would appreciate that. Now, maybe it's too simplistic. I respect what the committee did. I respect the time and effort that they put into learning about that as well. I think I spoke with the mayor recently and said, I have never understood the economics of it as well as I did from our last meeting. So that gave me a whole new perspective. I need that kind of perspective on so many pieces. And again, I'm sorry that I may be simple-minded in it, that I may not understand that. I appreciate everything that Steve explains to me every time, but I need to have it in chunks so that I can explain it to the people that are asking me questions about it. you know, and the document has been revised, and I appreciate the revision of the document. I know I'm looking at the revision, but again, it's still in a very broad form that I need in a smaller piece at a time. So I'm not looking at the whole elephant at once. That's my comment. So.
Okay. Diane, you had a comment along that same lines?
I just believe that I think if we work together and discuss each of these individual topics, then we can hopefully come together. So we are having a unified approach to this as opposed to a divisive. That's the purpose of us each talking to so many different people. That's why we try to get the input from as many citizens as possible, so we can bring that to the table together. And that's the best way to make a decision or a code that will be serviceable to the citizens, to property owners, to business owners. We want something that's workable and allows vision. One of the key things that have been asked is, what is our vision? Well, our vision should be to allow other people to be vision. We took an oath to uphold the Constitution and support our citizens. And so right now, I keep hearing this is the vision of one person or a few people. We want a code that allows vision for more, for everyone that has property. And so I think that we can do that together. We just need to work together, not be upset, not be divisive, bring the input and bring it together. I think it's possible. It's very doable.
The reason I get upset is when you talk about working together, we could have worked together on a survey to send out. But no, you went out on your own and did a survey. So now we're having to backtrack and pay thousands of dollars to a company to do a survey where we could have come up with something together, but there was no communication or working together. We were all blindsided by that survey. So you talk about one-sided, you can't have it both ways, Diane.
So how was I to get input from people during COVID when I couldn't talk with them specifically? You know, that was my goal. I wanted to talk with them in person, but we had COVID right at that moment. I had to come up with a way to get input from people where I couldn't talk with them personally. So did anyone say in the rule book, hey, you're a new council member? That doesn't fly. Sounded like a pretty good option for me.
Working together, you didn't work together with any of us. You didn't ask us about input. Hey, what about doing a survey? What's some thoughts on questions? You went and did your own survey. And so you talk about working together. You didn't work together on that.
Can we go forward?
Yes.
Would it be possible to somehow go forward as opposed to backward?
Yes.
On it?
Well, okay, so let's ask.
Either way.
Let me just see if I understand. First, I need some context, Council, in terms of how you see this. We started down this journey 6 or 7 months ago, and the purpose of that is that we went out there and we got lots of input, both from businesses, from public. You've got public input that has now come across to you. You're seeing some of that. I got 5 people signed up right now who have obviously appears to have read the document and ready to make comment on the document. And in that whole period of time, as we got all of this conversation taking place, and oh, by the way, Matt is about ready to do an RFP to put on the street to do a survey in conjunction to this, to get more public input on this conversation. And I'll ask Matt to talk about where he's at in that process here in a moment. All of that was presented. And for months and months and months of that input, we had a team of people who basically sat down and methodically went through all that input. This is the public, this is the property owners, this is the business owners, and revamped the entire document. Literally half the document as it is today. And with that then, having done all that work, we got a real good insight. And by the way, Diane, you agree. A lot of the input that we got from that came from the survey, and they took that into consideration when they revamped it. Here's my question to you. Did all of that work, all that input we received from the public mean anything at this juncture? Or do we start over? Is the contract we're about ready to write out? And by the way, you all were invited to ask questions with a survey. Do we stop issuing that contract to a company to do that survey because we need to address this as individual components, over the next few months. And I think that survey is going to talk in a broader context, the entire document. How do you see us proceeding now, having now worked this thing and had all this interest and all this investment? And how do you see us proceeding with this next step?
If we're going to do a survey, then I guess that means the survey we should have that information and be able to use that information. So I'm not sure when that needs to be into place, but it would be silly for us to make a decision on this code.
Oh, agreed.
And then do a survey after.
Oh, agreed. No, absolutely correct, Diane. That's the key. That one of the conditions in terms of before we're asked to basically take a vote, we need this survey input back to you so that you can assess what the data is telling us from the survey.
So Mayor, again, I'm thinking in my own mind. I'm not trying to project what I want, but I'm wondering, can this survey indicate more isolated pieces as opposed to the whole? You're saying we're ready to put an RFP out for this survey. I don't know the components of the survey clearly enough in my head to know, could those be categorized a little more so that we see, here's the general concern. The biggest concern is on building height, or the biggest concern is on mixed use. The biggest concern is on landscaping, or the biggest concern is, I don't know.
Well, you bring up a good point, Jan, and I surely want to make sure that we provide at least some direction on this. But about a month or so ago, a little over a month ago, the city went out there and actually solicited every one of us, every city council member, and says, please look at the questions. Let's see what kinds of questions we want to basically be asking the public so that we have a clear understanding from the output of that survey where the public wants the council to move.
Okay, and that's what I thought we were bringing to this work session, Mayor.
Well, we are, but I'm telling you right now is that question set the deadline on that was a few weeks ago. And those questions, if we're about ready to issue a contract, I am assuming, Matt, the questions have been formulated and we're about ready to issue a contract with those questions that were agreed upon and provided by the council. Is that correct, Matt?
But not necessarily the questions where we are. I'll answer some of the questions regarding the survey. The RFP is out. It's pretty open-ended. Timelines, things like that, depending on the company and price, it's going to have a lot to do with that. So the RFP is really getting the information from the companies of how much it costs to enter in that agreement.
But the questions are not so specific at this point?
We have the questions, but I wanted to see from the questions what was needed from the RFP. We can get in trouble if we issue an RFP and we're not ready for it and things like that. So I think we have safeguards and stuff in there now. It's out. It was in the newspaper yesterday, advertised for it. It closes on Monday. I was just talking to somebody on through email today on it. So we have a couple of vendors interested in doing it. Some of that detail can be worked through later though.
Well,
so maybe,
go ahead.
Maybe my timeline is wrong. So.
Well, this thing is obviously moving, and each time that we're basically having the conversations leading us to the next step. And one of the next steps we had a while ago, it's been probably over 2 months ago, was let's see about putting a survey out there with some questions that you developed, you had input in, and then we would get a contractor to go out there and make those contacts. Brian, you had a comment.
Well, a couple. First of all, on the survey, if we go with it, which I would hope we would, about what is the return back to the council, meaning we know that it's open-ended to do the survey, but are we looking at January that we'd have those responses, the 1st of February?
I don't know, Brian, what the RFP condition of the contract is. So Matt can probably answer that question.
Yeah, So some of those conditions need to still be negotiated. So we put out the RFP to get those proposals, talking the timelines and things like that with the contractor would be negotiated at the time of selection. So we're really looking at prices and things like that right now. I've talked to a couple of vendors and they indicated that the timing can be quite swift. We have a lot of the information here. So to send out the information to the general public, but a lot of that has to do with what we want out of it too. So
it seems that it would be much easier to get that input from the public, as broad as it is, than to say, well, we've heard from 20 people or so. I mean, that way we get a whole picture. I realize it might in fact be the elephant Jan fears, but it seems like to me, at least it's the council's way of reaching out, taking, a month and a half to 2 months and getting public input on this project. Because normally, if we were doing such a project, we'd fill either Roy Jr. or we'd fill Roy High Auditorium, and we'd have 40, 50 people line up and speak. But, the conditions of COVID, which are out of our control, why not do these 2 months? There's probably not a lot of building that's going to go on during these 2 months. And, that's what I think. I don't know how much the survey would cost, but for, what is it, $160 million project total with both phases, it'd be well worth every penny spent.
Appreciate the comment, Brian. Yeah, the only thing, let me just reflect back in terms of how we got here. It was the council's recommendation that the survey take place. And the council also indicated with the tasking that the staff would go ahead and present to the council an ample period of time, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, to provide then questions that they think, in fact, you felt would be important to get the information. That went out to the council. The staff has done exactly what the council has asked them to do. It also was suggested and indicated before that we would go ahead and get an RFP ready for us to go ahead and start this process. Now, here's what I think I'm hearing, council, and correct me if I'm wrong. You're not even sure exactly at this moment what questions are being asked. And second,
I know which ones I submitted.
Okay.
I read the document that you provided.
So did I.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, can those be categorized, Mayor? I'm not saying that the questions need to be changed or that I don't like the questions. I'm saying, can they be organized in such a way that we're not eating the whole elephant at a time?
Well, okay.
I'm not questioning the survey. I'm not questioning because I think as we look at revisions to our final document, then that's where we need to say, because I think the revisions that have been made have come from public comment.
All of it.
All
Every
of it.
bit of it.
So I think there's
80,
still revisions.
89 to almost 100 inputs from the public, which is, I've been around at least a while. I've never heard or seen that kind of input that has basically come from the public. And the committee has literally the committee has literally gone up and taken the subcommittee and looked at every one of those and made the changes based on public input.
So I'm saying I respect that. I like it. I
Okay.
think it's great. I think we're not finished.
But you're
That's all
not,
I'm saying.
okay, so you're saying is that you want more. Now what-
I think that following a survey, we will get more. We will
Okay,
have,
so, okay, that's a good comment then. So it sounds like, Matt, I think what we have to do in light of the conversation at this moment is I think we need to step back and ask the questions, at least present the questions back to the council and see if the questions are still the questions they want to ask. Because I'm
Sure.
sensing this is not this, we're in a position right now where I'm not saying we're starting over, but I'm
No.
indicating to you right now is that if we take this into 5 big chunks and using Brian's comment, we need 2 months to basically take on each one, then we might as well be planning this for the next election because we're not going.
No, I didn't
I'm sorry.
mean, I'm sorry. I didn't mean 2 months per question. I meant, what would this push us back about 2 months?
No, Brian, there's no push here. The council has to make a recommendation of when we need to take this to vote. When Matt and I put this on the conversation, and that's why it's here, it's a conversation piece we're out. This survey is critical to the council to know at least the next step in terms of what you think public opinion is. You've got the first one that came through the Planning Commission. You got the second one, which basically took from the survey and other sources, we got the input and changes were made. We posted this document out there and got a third one, in which case you heard Morgan just a few minutes ago talk about the response. I got 5 people about ready to comment on their position, and I got 143 likes or however many on each one of those pages saying is move forward with this idea. So we've got that. Now we're going to go for a 4th one. And not just a 4th one, it may be a 4th, 5th, or 6th one if we break these into smaller components. So what I'm asking would be is, and by the way, if we do 4 or 5 different surveys to get the public opinion about whether or not you think we should have a 60-foot building or an 80-foot building, if you need another survey to say, should we have mixed use or not mixed use, this is going to drag out. Now, if you're saying to me, so make sure you get it right, one survey, let's make sure it asks all the right questions. And so you can have the answers to the questions, then I would ask you then, if that's what I'm hearing, then let's get this set of questions back out. And we will ask you again, what kind of questions do you think we need? Because this council is in a position over the next 2 months, Brian, to get that survey back and be able to make an informed decision. Now, hold on that thought. Randy, I seen you come off mic. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, Mayor, I did have a couple of comments. The questions have been compiled. We compiled those I think it was about the middle of October. I did receive a couple of questions after that from Councilman Wilson that needs to be added to that. But we can have the list of questions. I believe there are 22 questions the last time I looked that were compiled that can be sent out to the council. Now, those questions are not specifically to specific sections of the plan. They're economic development questions, such as would you support a mixed-use development within the downtown community? So I think what the council will need to do is when you do get those questions, if you want more specific questions, then we need to get that input back from you so that when we meet with the consultant, because one of the things that we know is going to happen, we can't ask in a survey 22 questions because it just won't get answered. We believe that what will happen is when we meet with this consultant, they will probably break those 22 questions maybe into maybe 10 or 7 to 10 questions to ask, because we don't want somebody to, the first thing you do when you do a survey like this is you let the individual know the survey is going to take X amount of minutes. And for someone to answer that on a phone, we can't have it be any longer than 5 to 8 minutes, or we won't get their participation. So when you see the list of questions, realize that that is going to have to be narrowed. So another thing I would like to have the council do is when we send that out, prioritize those questions. Give us your top 10. And if we haven't got a question you want answered, give us that question so we'll have that too. So if we can do two things with these questions, send them to you, you look them over, prioritize them, give us your top 10. Then if there's something else that needs to be asked, please let us know. I think that'll give us the direction that when we meet with the consultant, we'll know how to move forward with the survey.
Thank you, Randy.
Randy, may I ask you a question? So a perfect example is, are you in favor of mixed use? And is there a way that they can know before they take the survey what you refer to as mixed use? That's where I think my people get hung up, the people that I'm hearing from. And you're saying, well, that document's been online, it's there, they can do it, they know it, they should, but they don't.
Yes, I think you could probably identify, get more specific on what you're identifying as mixed use. I think that's a possibility. And I think that when you see the questions that have been prepared, and again, some of those will all come from the council and the mayor. I think if you look at those, and if you think that you like a question, but it needs to be better defined, then let us know that when you give back your input. Just say, this is a great question, but I think it needs to be more specific to this, just like you said, Jan.
And I don't think, you almost might have to tell them, I'm going to do a survey with you, and these are the things you're going to need to know as you do this survey.
Yeah, that's
would you be
possible.
willing to participate?
That's possible too. And again, when we get the consultant on board, who's the experts in this, they will help direct us on how we do those types of things. But I will have that list out to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
So then you will be able to look at it over the weekend and be able to give us better direction.
Thank
so
you, Randy.
The survey is going to be a phone survey then, not like an email or a mailed survey?
We think it would be better to do a phone survey than it would be a mail survey, because number one, we can get that done quicker. And two, I think we get a better result if you actually call, and they'll give us an idea of how many people will need to be contacted to give us that correct number that would be good for to make your decisions as you move forward.
And I assume they'll leave a voicemail, because if I don't recognize the number, I don't answer it.
That would be it. The other thing that we talked about doing with them is there might be some ways they can follow up with that. But I think the plan is once we select the contractor, we'll meet with them. They'll give us some direction, and then we'll let the council know more about how the survey is going to be done, what's it going to entail, and what will be the specific questions, because I think you need to know what it is before it's sent out, and you give us final approval as to, yeah, I like that survey, and I think that addresses the concerns that I have as a council member moving forward.
Well, I agree with Jan. Being on this committee, I didn't know what mixed use was neither. And I think that if you do a survey, you're going to have to explain everything to them, like you had to explain everything to me being on the committee, because it was all foreign language to me also. So I agree that a lot of people don't understand exactly, what the form-based code is and what we're trying to do. All I hear from everybody is we got to do something, and that they don't like the looks of 1900. And that's the main thing I keep hearing. And but they don't want rows of apartment buildings and condos going down 1900 neither. But yes,
start over. I'm
right. Me neither. I mean, it's just too much work. But I just think we need to take it into separate sections also. And I think people are okay if they build apartments along the freeway. It doesn't block anybody's view. But so much on the west side, but they still want a hotel. They still want a theater. They still want, I think if we get condos and we get people moving in, not apartments, townhomes or condos, and then restaurants will want to come because there are going to be people walk across the street to eat. but we got to do something to generate tax revenue, but the people need to explain exactly what it is we want to do. And so to move forward with the city.
I truly recognize the work of the people that have been done. I appreciate it. I'm denying.
Okay. But Ann, let me just make this clear based on what you just said. You've heard the public talking, you've read the input. Would
Right.
you be surprised if I told you the words you just said you could put in this document? And then that document would be compliant to the comments you're hearing from the public. And it's that easy.
Right.
And we could take this workshop and simply says, I want to change paragraph 2-3. I want to change paragraph to talk to this. And we can fine tune this document into the perfected document it needs. My sense is we're going to start over. We're going to start over. This is a new document. Now, Brian, to your point, it may take 2 months to get this survey through. And we won't know that until the experts come in and tell us. But I will tell you this. When I was involved asking Weber State University to provide the last survey that Roy had, they needed 765 inputs to be able to provide a 95% confidence in terms of saying, this is what the Roy Lorenz wants. 700 inputs. And they're not 700 inputs in my backyard. There were 700 inputs equally distributed across 13 different zones within the city. And they got it. They got it either by email or they had to do face-to-face, but they got that input. So when we talk to a contractor and say, we're looking for these questions, it's not talking to 5 people. It's not talking to 10 people. It's talking to hundreds of people in Roy who are willing to step up and answer the questions, and not at one location, at multiple locations across the city to ensure the accuracy. Now, as I stated, the agreement we walked into this meeting was you needed that input. You need that input. And we want, as we've been asked to do by you, the council, is to get this survey moving, get it ready. And Matt is ready to basically do what he's been directed to do. I just want you to answer this question, and don't answer it to me because it's not. Are you asking now the city to redo this whole thing, to start over? Or is going to be getting 700 people in Roy City to give you a response adequate enough that you feel comfortable that you can make an informed decision? And if it's not the 700 surveys, what do you need? Because I'd like to walk out of here tonight, if we can, to figure out what it is you're going to need so that we can move forward on this issue.
Right. I want to know, how do they choose these people? What if it's just somebody who's just living in Utah for a year rather than someone who's vested in the city of Roy? And I don't know.
I will tell you from the survey that we did, and I will tell you, we had like 8 people that actually went to different zones that could not get the 65 different responses, and they had to go knock on doors.
Yeah.
We had to keep it random, because if you want to basically go up there and get the answer that you want, then I say to you, why don't you walk into my neighborhood and get 95 of those inputs out of my neighborhood? Or why don't we go into some other neighborhood? Because I guarantee you, those people may be like-minded. They may think, yeah, this is what we need to do.
Right.
But maybe what you need to do is simply says, I need 13 different zones within Roy, and I want to get 65 inputs from 13 different zones, and they are mixed. They're mixed on income. They are mixed in terms of population. They're mixed in every way so that you got a good representation of what Roy City wants. And we had to get over 700.
I think
Mayor,
that's great.
Can we ask on the survey the demographics? So we're saying, look, 30% of our survey results came from a demographic of over $100,000 household income, or I don't know,
like their age group, you know, are you?
An age group.
Can you ask that? Are you able to ask?
To answer your question, and Matt and Randy can probably better answer it, but let me just make it clear. When I was working with that was an absolute prerequisite. you had to have the demographic component or you can't make correlations to the data. I do not know what the statement of work is saying, but here's what I do know. If the council says that that kind of information, Jan, is important to you, then please make sure that the information that's important to you is found in this survey.
Okay, okay.
You need to
Yeah.
do that.
I mean,
Otherwise,
most often when I take a survey, they ask me those preemptive
Yes.
questions
Yes.
right in
Right.
the beginning. What's your household income?
that's right.
Right.
How old are you? You know, those are things that come up
Mhm.
right off the bat. And if I say I don't want to answer that, then
Don't.
it flags that. It at least tells me
Mhm.
unwilling to answer.
No, you're absolutely correct. Which
And this
means
is-
if Matt has basically got a contractors who are interested in doing this because they are professional, then we need to make sure, council, that Matt is asking the right questions to meet your needs. Remember, the purpose of this survey was to give you more information. This is the fourth round of information gathering from the public to help you to make a decision. Now, Matt, do you want to add to that comment?
I was just gonna add to it and say, that's the primary reason why we want to hire a professional. It's really easy to do like a Survey Monkey or something through our social media accounts, but the primary reason why the survey is so expensive is because they look at these parameters and they know what they're doing with it, that they want to get a true value to what people think, and they have to have, you know, so many people in so many different areas to stratify that sample. So that's the reason why it does cost a lot of money. That's the reason why we're looking at an RFP to hire a professional contractor to do it. So I feel comfortable that when we select a contractor, they'll be able to answer all those questions for us.
But most, like Randy says, you only probably want to ask people maybe 10 or less questions, because most people are like, oh, I don't have time for this. I'm in a
Yeah.
hurry. So we got to make sure they're good questions. So if the first
And-
ones are,
I think
what's
those,
your income, you know, and what's your
I think
vision
those
for Roy?
preemptive
And
questions
Are pretty,
are not usually considered part of that 10.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
correct me if I'm wrong, Randy.
That
But
is
those-
correct.
Those
Right.
demographic questions are
Those-
not usually part of the
Okay.
real question.
No, those demographic questions are either asked at the beginning or they're asked at the end of the survey, but they're not part of the questions that are asked for the survey. So again, when we send you that survey, you need to really look at the questions. And like I said, probably 10 would be the most, and we need to get your prioritization of those questions. And if we haven't asked, if it's not on the list and you think it needs to be on the list, we
Put it
need to
on.
know what that question is.
Yeah,
right.
perfect. Okay, are we okay with that, council? Everybody
Thank you.
okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now
Yeah.
Thank you
remember,
for clarifying those
go ahead.
issues.
Go ahead, Diane.
I just want to mention that what's very nice about this survey is that it is helping us get citizen response, but it's also very important for us to get business people's response and property owners in that area response. And I do have some comments that people have called me to because they couldn't call in for their responses, that I'll give some of that later after we let our others. But that's one component. This survey is going to help us with one component. And maybe what we can do is, I don't know, Randy, if this is possible, but I think this survey is really meant more for the citizens, but we also need to make sure we're including the input from the property and business owners of this area that we are talking about changing.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, now, let's make sure we walk out of here with at least something out of this. You asked basically for a survey. We're about ready to present that to you. And then we'll go ahead and execute that contract. I'm indicating to you, I'm hard pressed going up there and having a town hall meeting on this topic until there is a vaccine available to protect our citizens and you.
Right.
And I'm telling you right now, and we're watching this like a hawk, I get an update every 2 times a week. The fact of the matter is, do not expect for the general public a vaccine probably until sometime in late spring or early summer.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm asking you right now, the survey is surely one part of this process. What else are you going to need to be able to make a decision about where we go on this document beyond the survey? Brian?
I have now, and here's just a really brief explanation. I'm on the Economic Development Committee, and I sat in probably only half of the meetings for this project because of a conflict of interest
Correct.
that I noted with the city. So anytime this project was discussed, I left the room. So I am coming in again about halfway through the movie and trying to figure out the entire plot. I have a couple of questions. I called Randy Sant this past week and gave him 6 questions if he would to deliver to, is it Jim Woodbury, Randy?
It was Jeff Woodbury. Jeff Woodbury.
Oh, Jeff, I'm sorry. And anyway, because I wanted to know some specifics, like Jan does. I wanted to know the nuts and bolts. And he was kind enough to answer each of my questions. Now, not to where I agree with all of his answers, but he answered them. And so what I have is I either have questions for Joe or the mayor or Ann or Steve that were in on that committee, so I can double check the facts that I've been given from Jeff Woodbury.
Okay.
Now, we can do that tomorrow, or we can do that on the record now. It's up to you. But I have tried to do some homework.
Okay, let me just, so there's no confusion. Let me just make this statement. So there's no confusion here. This particular mixed use chapter 13 is not specific to any developer, no property owner. What you're going to approve, if you approve it or modify it, is specifically for every property owner along 1900. And so I'm just saying, Brian has an issue, he has a question to a specific property owner. But there's also property owners who have indicated an interest in mixed use development that Brian is not asking, who has an interest in the outcome of this conversation. And so my point is, I'm not doing this, and you should not be doing this in the best interest to a single entity, but rather for what is right for the everybody, including the residents of this city. Now, in all fairness, and please don't be offended, you were elected to make a decision, an informed decision. Let's go ahead and let's pull the information in, gather the data, ask your questions, figure out what you're going to need, get the survey, and then tell me or tell Matt, what else do you need? Now, having said that, Steve, you had a comment.
Well, I was just going to say, hey, Brian, of the committee, since I'm the one that's full-time in here, come and talk with me. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I've already sat down, is it 2 or 3 times, Diane, that we've sat down and talked, trying to answer her questions, kind of getting more into the nuts and bolts or the knobs and dress or the curtains, so to speak. But I'd be more than happy to sit down with you, Brian, and answer your questions, and same with Jan. Whenever you guys would like, I'm here 8 to 5 most days. Some nights it goes a little bit longer, but
or 8 to 8 or
yeah.
8.
But
Thank you
I'm
for
more
your
than happy to sit down with you and discuss any concerns, any comments, any questions, even if they're very specific, like Diane's were, of why this, why that, how come this word. I'd be happy to sit down with you, Brian. So anytime.
So can I ask a question that I think relates to both Diane's question and Brian's question, and maybe I'm off on this, but in this upcoming survey, is there a way that we could isolate and put some business? They could answer the exact same questions in my mind. And I don't know for sure if they could, but the exact same questions, but have them be, I am a property owner. I am not a citizen of Roy. Because there are a lot of property owners, particularly along 1900, that are not citizens of Roy. I want to know their opinion because they are property owners and they're the face of our downtown. So I certainly want to hear their opinion, but they're not going to come out on a citizen survey.
Okay. That's a good point, Matt. Would you make sure in that conversation? Let me make sure. Let's make sure we understand what this document is and what it is not. This is simply giving property owners and businesses a choice. There is nothing in this document that says you absolutely have to have a mixed-use development. Nothing. If you want it, it's a choice. If you believe that there's a portion of the document that is too restrictive, change it. Change it.
I get that, Mayor. So that's what I would like to hear as part of that survey as well, but not limit it to citizens. Also include, and I want to be able to disaggregate that. I don't want to say they have more power or they have less power. I'm just saying I want to know.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair question, and it can be structured into the demographic questions. Are you a property owner? Are you a resident? Mark all the above that are applicable. I like the idea. Okay. Are we okay with everything we've talked about so far? Okay. Okay, last question before we get into public comment. Is there anything else you think as a council you're going to need from the city to get us to the point that you're going to be ready and feel comfortable about making a decision?
How about a prescription? Kind of pills.
Joe, I can help you out.
Bring it on. Whatever you got in the cabinet, I'll take
Joe,
right now.
you and I. Hey,
Please.
I do have.
Oh, hold on. Oh, hold on, Diane. Ann, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Diane.
Go ahead, Diane.
You were asking what we were going to need. I just believe that as we look at the big parts that Jan's talking about, that's going to be what's going to be helpful for us, because then we can discuss those fundamental sections and see which parts need or not to be adjusted to meet the needs of citizens as well as business owners as well as property owners. And once we have that information, that's what's going to help us be able to bring the code together so it's very beneficial for everyone and it's not a suppressive or restrictive code for anyone else. I appreciate your comments that we can work this out, Mayor, so it can be supportive of everyone as opposed to restrictive to some. Thank you.
Okay, so having said that, let me just make this comment. Steve just announced that he says he's available to every one of you on your schedule to answer any question and teach you what this document is and isn't. Now, based on Diane's comment, this is what I heard. If you go to Steve and Steve can explain to you what you're reading, what it means, everything about it, can you take that understanding out to the public and ask the questions? And if the answer to that is probably not, then I'm concerned that what we need to do is that you're saying, to make this work, we've got to meet in this forum at least a couple of times a month as a workshop to be able to get through this document, or it's going to take a year or two to work through it. But I'm saying to you is that, what did you ask Steve? Any one of you do not have to have, according to the law, have to have this kind of a meeting to sit down with Steve and get every answer to every piece of the conversation you need to take this to the public. Every one of you. And you don't have to have a meeting like this where we have to do this in a public meeting to have that conversation. So all I'm asking you would be is, if you're seriously about wanting to understand this document, and I assume you do, then I would say, make an appointment, take a piece of the document, make an appointment with Steve and sit down and say, Steve, you need to explain this and this and this. It's 52 pages. It's not 106. And I promise you the 5 sections that you're going to review is going to talk this: the district, the height of the buildings, mixed use. Do you like parks? Do you basically think that maybe the setbacks are okay? And how about the parking? Now, these are not brainstorming difficult topics. A couple of them may need more clarification. Perfect. Steve can answer that question. But if you need a thorough understanding in terms of 5 different choices of parks, then I'm simply saying is, what's the problem with a park? And if you don't like it, then why don't you make a recommendation as council to take the parks completely out of the document? If you don't like the fact is it has some pieces, make a recommendation to remove it. But I will tell you this, you better darn well know what exactly the current ordinance say in the rest of the city. Because if it's not found in this document, it defaults to what's in the city. And I'm going to be blunt with you. And Steve, you need to hear this from the mayor. There are some pieces that was in this original document and pieces in this document today that, in my opinion, is better than what we have on the current ordinance we have today. It's a better for the decision maker and it's a better for the property owner. But it's only better if you approve it. If you don't like it and you don't want it, remove it. You have that authority. So here's my question to you. One last question. What do you want more than this survey to help you on this path to getting us to a decision?
Again, Mayor, I believe I can go into Steve. I believe I can ask my questions. I will have an independent understanding, but I want to hear what my fellow council members say about it at that same time, because they might sway my decision. They might have different ideas, and I respect their opinions. I respect what Joe has done as far as the work. And I don't have a discussion format because it's not within our legalities to do that unless we do it in an open format. So I can get an independent opinion, but I want also a format for getting a consensus opinion.
And Jan, you know what's interesting about that is? That's why we're here. What I'm concerned about, Jan, and I'm concerned about council is the fact is, have you even read the document?
Yes.
And I don't want you to basically take that. I've read it 3 times. Have you read the document? And if you don't understand what it's saying, then tell me why you're not making an appointment with Steve and discussing it. Diane, as far as I can tell, you're the only one that sat down with Steve so far and asked the technical questions on what that document says. If there's other ones, perfect. I'm not aware of those. But if you're not asking the experts in the city for that, what are you waiting for? Because I, like you, Jan, would like to come in this conversation, and I'd like to basically say to you. I'd like you to basically tell me, and Diane, this will be something that I was ready to bring to the table, and I'm surprised, in fact, you didn't. Bottom line, part 1, page 1, title 10, chapter 13, the very first page of that document, what I wanted to present to this council was an introduction added to that document. And you know what's going to be found in that document, Diane? I would like to have the purpose of this chapter. You've been saying that for 7 months now. Why don't we put the purpose in there? I can make up one. We could make up one. It's simply a couple of paragraphs that define the purpose. You've been asking for that. Tell me why this conversation right now is not a conversation that says, what I want to do in this one on page 1, title 10, chapter 13, add a introduction, and one part of that introduction is a definition of the purpose of why we're doing a chapter 13. I've got it written. Why are we not having that conversation? Why are we not having a conversation that talks about one other piece that I'm concerned about? I would like to have had a conversation.
Mayor.
I would like to have had a conversation that talks about, are we going to allow townhouses in our downtown business district. And if we're going to do that, called row houses, do you really want to have that to be a completely residential? Or would you at least willing to talk about the fact is, I'd recommend that we take the word residential out of the document on page 13-22 and take that residential component on the ground floor. That's the conversation we should be having. Instead, what we're having, council, is a conversation of whether or not we should have another survey. And I was kind of hoping we'd get a little more detail than that. So here's the challenge.
But Mayor,
Please.
Mayor, I'm confused. We had planned this survey weeks and weeks
Yes,
ago.
yes.
Isn't another survey? It was the survey that we've submitted questions for
Yes.
that need to go out to the public. That's all it is.
Yes. Brian, I don't dispute your point. That's all it is. But here's my concern, Brian. I'm not so sure that's enough. I'm not so sure this council is ready to basically says, what I need is that survey and I'm ready to step up.
I'm ready to step up.
Okay, then I will say to you then is that let's do the survey. Let's talk to Steve. Let's get your questions answered. You take this information out to the public. You get that input. And the next meeting we have, after you have the survey, if it need to be a decision meeting or a workshop, we can have that interaction and we can start talking about the specifics that I just shared with you.
I would like that to be a work session, Mayor. I'm going to go on the record of saying I would like that to be a work session because
Okay.
from that survey, I would like to be able to see what revisions would we like
Fair enough. But
before
please-
we make a decision.
But then I would ask you, then please, based on that recommendation, and we're not making decisions here, come to the next workshop ready, prepared to have a serious conversation about doing something with this document. Or not.
Will
because
we have the survey results by that time?
I'm not going to basically schedule another meeting on this topic until we have a survey results. That was the
Thank
going
you,
in
Mayor.
strategy.
Thank
We
you,
were
Mayor.
going to have that survey done, ready for you, having give you time to review it before we bring this topic back into an agenda. You'll have the
And-
time.
I
ahead.
think that's fair to our public as well, because they want to make comment when the comment is really irrelevant until we have something to comment on.
Well, you right now have a 52-page document to review. And if we get the survey done right, you'll have a survey input plus the information that came from the Planning Commission, the input we got there, plus the information we had when we did the form-based code and took all those changes, plus all of the information you received from Morgan today. You have had and would have had and still would have 4 different sessions from public input. And you hadn't even heard from what the 5 that are waiting to talk, what they have to say about this.
Let's let them speak now, okay? Then we can move forward.
I want to make sure, is there any other comments on this topic before we go to public comment period?
Well, then, yes, there are, but we may want to, I think that there are 2 more categories that need to be, when we're talking about the components of this document, I think we need to talk about the 5 restricted types. And then I think we need to talk about non-conformance. So if you are writing a list of the components that need to be discussed, I believe those need to be added. And then after the public comment, or as part of the public comment, I need to read some letters from other people, but let the people waiting do theirs first. Thank you.
Can that be tabled until a future work session? I just think we get too long. We can't hear it all. I can't absorb it all. That's me.
Okay. Comments, any other comments we want to talk about? Okay,
I
please
say
don't
let
misunderstand here.
the public speak. There's people waiting on the
I know.
line and all we are is beating a dead horse at the moment.
Yeah, I'm honestly believing, let's hear the public comments and then maybe because you're obviously getting to the point where it's going to become troublesome for you. Maybe it's it simply says, Diane, if you have other things you'd like to send to us in terms of people's input, please send them. I think we hear the 5 people talk. And then basically, let's go ahead and finish up and decide what's next, okay? Otherwise, we're not going to get through this, and you're not prepared to basically want to get too far into this anyway. So let's go ahead. Morgan, would you check and see if in fact we still have Mr. Flower, Mr. Jensen, Mr. Henderson, Connie, and Clara, see if they're still available.
Two of them have actually left the group, or one of them actually didn't ever show up.
Okay.
But we do still have a Mr. Henderson. It's actually Mr. Brown who is going to speak, Dennis Brown, and then a Joseph Fowler. So
Okay.
I'll let Mr. Henderson go first, if that's all right.
That works, please.
I believe you're on mute. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Please.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I had a couple of points, and this is kind of in a little bit of an official capacity. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Sean Henderson. I'm the current chairman of the Roy Business Advisory Board. And speaking about this document in amongst the group members, first off, the general consensus amongst all of our members are that we're very excited about this. We think that this is a very positive step forward to be able to send a message to, business people that Roy is open for business, and we are trying to invite you to come and do business in Roy. The two points that we wanted to ask for clarification on is number one, in the height of the buildings. Had a question about, I believe it's in Business District B. The restrictions are a height of 60 feet, which is basically the west side of the intersection of 5600 and 1900.
Correct.
With the east side being 80 feet. We did have a question about that as to, why the restriction? Why not just have that to 80 feet? We thought that, maybe that might, be a little bit more and possibly be a little more inviting to a developer in the future for coming in, that restriction is not there. Also, the other point that we wanted to ask for clarification on is that we see this as a way to encourage more business coming into Roy and more development to be able to come into Roy and hopefully revitalize some of the rundown areas. And it's been voiced that with this mixed use, there's some concern about possibly people coming in and just doing apartment buildings, or like the mayor mentioned just a little bit ago with having townhomes. So what the BAB's opinion is possibly, is there something in this document that could be worded as such to require a portion of a development be commercial, in an effort to give us what we really need in this city is more commercial, especially since we're going to be losing some along 5600.
Steve, maybe you can answer those questions for us.
Okay, want to kind of share my screen as well. Can everybody see the map?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the dark blue is core A, the kind of the purple is core B, and the light blue is the general. So to kind of talk about the first question of height and why core B is only 60 feet. When the committee got together, this was an item that we discussed pretty heavily. In the core A, we felt it could be taller. One, it's on the east side of 19. Two, there is no residence that abut anywhere against that, so you can have a little taller building. Core B and general do abut residential. So there was a concern of, because some of the concerns that came out of the general, from the public, even in some of the council, is we got to protect those residents from commercial. The core B was left at the same height that exists today in the regional commercial zone. In 95% of the cases, there is a street between residential and the commercial. The only 5% is where the Golden West building is right now, where it does abut right up against, the the backyard is next to residential. And then the general area has more backyards that are up against the residential. So they thought, let's drop that down to be 40 feet, which is only 5 feet taller than a residential zone can have. Again, taking into consideration, how do we protect the residents? How do we allow businesses to still do stuff? So, I mean, it was kind of one of those, we've just got to, come up with some number first, kind of have a debate, but those are the reasons why each district had a different height. Overall, if you take the average, it's still 60 feet, which the current zone allows. But that's why 80, 40, and 60 were placed. As for to encourage the development in Roy and the concerns of just apartments, the only building type that Diane kind of talked about that allows for apartments only on the main floor is the row homes. Those are only allowed in the general district. Again, is more residential in a lot of places than it is commercial. So having residential against residential was the thought. Everywhere else and all the other building types require commercial on the main floor, commercial office or a service on the main floor. And then then all the other uses, floors 2 and up. So again, the subcommittee kind of looked at that saying, okay, row homes, commercial doesn't suit a row home. When you go down Philadelphia or New York or what have you, row homes are houses. That's why they didn't think of putting commercial in a row home. And that's, again, the only building type that doesn't have a requirement for commercial on the main floor. Hope I answered your question, Sean.
Well, let me ask you first. Can you still hear me?
Go ahead, Sean.
Can you say, okay. So perhaps what we had talked about is that you look at that intersection of 5600 and 1900, right there at the intersection with the that area where the Ocean Mart is and where the old Planet Fitness used to be there. There's quite a bit of room there that if a development came in on that corner, there's a potential that they could grow higher than what the 60 foot is. So just for a topic of discussion, maybe that core B maybe needs to be shrunk down a little bit if that's what the issue is being so close to the residential. Then make the core B smaller where it's away from the residential, then maybe move the general more towards the residential to keep that height down, because we understand that. But there's things like hotels and things like that have always been up for discussion, and it seems like that maybe having a lower height right there may be a little bit inhibitive in trying to attract that.
Right. Well, the heights and the locations of each core is just kind of a starting point. They kind of went with what was presented the first time. Now, again, core B, 95% of it is buffered by a road between residential. So they're not, other than the Golden West property, there's a street between them. So they have their 25-foot setback to 50 or 60, or in case of 5600 South, an 84-foot wide right-of-way. Then the commercial can begin. There's a big enough gap. Now, do we say 100 feet in each direction off of 19 and off of 56 on the west side of 19 on 56 can be 80 feet? That's something the council can discuss, but this was the committee's start point of here's kind of the 3 districts, here's kind of where the breaking points are for height and stuff. So if the council says, that corner, both the northwest and southwest of 5619 deserves to have the same height, that's what these 5 individuals get to discuss and vote on. So To me, it's a starting point. I do appreciate your comment.
And
Sean?
Mayor, thank you very much for your efforts on this. And I hope that everybody does do their due diligence to get up to speed on this document. We think it's a great thing, and you've got our 100% support on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Okay, I think, Joe, are you there?
Let me just, all right, there you go, Joe. You should be allowed to speak.
Great. Can you hear me?
Great.
Yes,
thank
we
you.
can. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for taking the time to let us comment on this. And I would like to thank the mayor for speaking to me the other night and took a lot of time to explain some things to me and made me feel quite a bit better about what's been going on. So thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
So a couple of the things that we had talked about with the mayor, or that I had talked about on Monday with the mayor, were my concerns about going to this mixed use code, or were basically what the impacts are going to be for existing business, since my family owns the Burger Bar property, and that, has been there for a really long time, as you all know. And we were really concerned about how that's going to affect us in the future. So as I spoke with the mayor, we had discussed possibly making an allowance in there to exempt existing properties from being forced to comply with the new, I guess how would you put on the look of the buildings and the materials, if we were to decide to increase the building size or to improve our property or some sort, is not being required to come up completely to code, as that would be extremely restrictive financially. I mean, we wouldn't be able to do that. So that was one of our major concerns, basically, is just how that's going to affect us in the future. If we decide to expand or change something, we would, the way it's written, as we read it, we would be forced to, rebuild the building and fix the fascia and the paint schemes to kind of match what has been proposed for this new code. So I hope that would be something that you would consider in putting in there. And also the other thing that I would like to know is, and ask this question is, has there been any studies or any sort of where this form-based code / mixed use does increase business? I'd like to see where that information is coming from. I am curious about that. Do you have you guys looked at that research, and where can I look at that?
That's a good question, Joe. What I can do is mixed use developments. And when you kind of look at that, you can look at nationwide or you can look at local. I think it probably might be better if I find some stuff that's local.
Yes, for sure.
And that way, if I can get you talking with people who in fact have seen it, worked with it, and maybe even better, people who are who's in the property owners and business side in terms of that, because it's the residents may have a different opinion in terms of that issue. But if you're looking at from a business perspective, let me see if I can't get you some contact points. You can call them directly, and they can kind of give you all sides of the issue about whether or not mixed use development is a benefit or a curse.
Sure. I would appreciate that. That'd be very helpful. Thank you. We, as a property owner and as a business owner, we tend to be on the side of, property owners' rights. And while we do, I do respect the citizens' right for, to make the city look nice. And we love, we always love to improve and make things look nice. And I think the city has done a really good job just lately with the street lights, and some of the improvements have really come a long way. And I think maybe one thing that could just be an option is to incentivize some businesses to, I don't know, this is maybe not the platform for it, but incentivize businesses to upgrade their properties of their own, accord. And I know we partnered with the city. They offered to, spend some money and help us with our facelift on our building to make it match the other corner. And that was really cool, and something I didn't think about. We're so busy running restaurants, we don't sometimes think about those kinds of things. And so that kind of outreach makes a big difference for people who may not have that in mind. And so that's just something that we don't think about very often. And so that's very helpful. And if there's other programs where you can offer an incentive or some sort of incentive or tax incentive or just something else that we could, see that as a positive step forward in the community. And that's just an aside of this whole conversation.
Perfect, Joe. Good comment.
Mayor, if I may,
Yes, sir.
Joseph, if it's possible, because to answer your first question on the impacts and, you know, things that may happen if you decide to do it and being exempt from stuff like that, it will take longer to explain to you. So if you and I could just sit down and talk a little bit, I think it's easier to kind of do it face to face so we can really sit down and talk.
Oh, for sure. I'd be willing to do that.
You know, 6 to 8 to 10 feet apart. I know Diane, when her and I met, we were 10 feet apart and still had a face-to-face meeting. I think it might be easier to answer your question because it's going to just be longer than a couple minutes to do that. So
sure, I would be willing to do that. I would love to actually get.
Yeah,
I've been looking at the specifics, and a lot of it won't apply to me because we're established business. But I mean, we do, hopefully in the future would like to, upgrade the building and have, upkeep. And
right.
Hopefully we continue to grow, and I might need to expand in the future. And so that is something we are concerned about. So I would love to do that.
And I believe your sister was it Carrie Fowler that was on? Or is that just a different Fowler altogether?
Oh, that was probably my mother. I think she just decided to have me speak for the family. So
okay, yeah. I mean, and we can bring any of your siblings along with that to kind of answer their questions.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll reach out. I'll reach out to you, and we'll set that up.
Okay, great.
That's perfect. Thank you.
You bet.
And I think our last comment is going to be Dennis Brown.
Okay. Is it Dennis Brown?
I believe so.
Okay, Mr. Brown, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate all the work you guys have done in behalf of the citizens of Roy. I am a longtime resident and citizen of Roy, and reviewed a little bit of the mixed use form that came out just recently. My wife and I drove up 5600 South to the Northrop Grumman building to see how they were going along just a couple of days ago. And they're great big structures, and we're very happy they're there. And I think they'll bring a lot of business into the city. So the question I asked ourselves as we was driving west into Roy off of 5600 South is what type of businesses will be coming into Roy as a result of this new construction at Hill Air Force Base. I thought about hotels, which I think will be one of the major reasons we may have a hotel come in, or a restaurant. So with that question in mind, I thought about in the Core A area, I think this mixed use should be considered for a hotel space or a restaurant space, and not so much for a mixed use space where you have a retail space and apartment buildings on a top level. Core B, I'm fine with that, but I just think the main area in Core A should be focused on for hotels and restaurants and businesses like that. Larger businesses that require more parking or larger buildings. Core B, I thought would be okay for mixed use, so that's my recommendation on that. The other thing I thought about was that the aerospace theme that's in the document. I think it hinders businesses to come into the area and be directed they have to have an aerospace theme when they've spent probably thousands of dollars in their own marketing department to try and design the type of building they want to have. I'm not too much in favor of the aerospace theme, so I think that should be considered to be taken out. And then that's primarily my only concerns is the aerospace theme, and then leave Core A for larger retail spaces. So I think a hotel could go in there by the Dilly Dally area where Dr. John's is at, or where the cell phone tower is at. So that's my comment on that there. And I do appreciate, Mayor, I appreciate you responding back to my emails. Diane, Brian, Ann, and Jan, I appreciate you talking to me about some of your concerns and answering some of our questions. And Randy, I'm asking you to think about some of the things I've had to say tonight, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Dennis, thank you. Appreciate your comments and input. It's perfect. Please, Steve.
Just on the aerospace theme, the reason why that came about was when the Planning Commission first started this process, I want to say mid and Joe helped me out a little bit, mid 2018, they were kind of talking about what type of building styles would they like, what type of theme should we do. We had a couple people come in to that work session and talk about it, and aerospace was kind of what their thoughts were. So that's why the theme was. Now with aerospace, it's not, as Diane likes to point out, is it a shall or is it a should? And the theme itself is a should, so they don't have to do it. And this kind of goes into Joe's question as well, as the list of materials is more of what, you know, architects and that will want. And the list of materials in this new ordinance has more options than the existing code.
That's right.
The existing code, you know, it's brick, stone, or stucco, and you're just about it.
Okay, thank you.
So, and as for, you know, larger development in the
Okay.
core A and only mixed use in the core B, you can actually fit a motel or hotel in the core B areas as well. So I wouldn't want to limit that, but they also have developments that, you know, they'll put commercial or office on the main floor, maybe the second floor, and then want to have condos or what have you up above. That's kind of what a mixed use would do. And then you could have a hotel right next to it. So a hotel is not precluded from any of the zones. Some are more favorable just because of height. You know, if someone wants just a 4-story or a 3-story hotel in the general, they can do it. I just don't see them wanting to do that when they could do 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, you know. But those are things that the council can look at on what uses are allowed or not allowed.
Thank you, Steve. Mr. Brown, do you have another comment?
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
And
thanks
again,
for your
Mr.
input.
Brown, if you want, I'm open. I'm here all day. You can come in and I can answer any additional questions you may have.
No, thank you. I'm okay.
Okay, thanks for helping us. Sorry, we're taking a little bit of a long time on this, but good discussion. Okay, council. Okay, here's what I think the takeaway from this meeting is.
Mayor,
I'm
Mayor,
sorry.
I'm sorry. These are 2 comments from 2 people that wanted to call in. I feel compelled that they need to be on the record. I can do it fast in less than 3 minutes if you want, but I do feel that I told them I would put it on the record for them because they weren't able to be at the Zoom. If you'd please allow me that.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, the first one is from Jim Sachs. He is the Director of Operations for Common Sense. He had participated before and he wanted me just to reiterate that he has reviewed the revised version. His biggest concern is that the form-based code efforts of it was basically those in favor of form-based code tell you that form is more important, but that is not true, and that you need to have form, but you also need to allow function to be very important with that. And that when you have specific building types that are required, it removes individuality, limits collaboration, and gives decision-making to a small group of administrators as opposed to allowing business and business owners the ability to do what they need. And by having all the parking and stuff done at the inside or the back of the lot, then it takes the business away from, he said it was like doing business with a person with your back to them. And those were his primary, he felt that the non-conformance needed to be reviewed. And he felt that having strict forms needed to be, it needed to be looked at, because he felt the mixed use principle itself was fine, but having strict codes or strict forms that had to be mandated, he did not feel that that was appropriate for business. The next one is Corey Watson, who is the owner of McDonald's. His conversation, and these are his exact conversation. Here you go. I understand what Roy wants to do. McDonald's wants to stay updated and look good. In fact, we tore down our building and rebuilt it to accomplish that facelift. Under this form-based code, we would not be able to do that. Non-conforming restrictions will kill our business. It backs me into a corner. Why punish those businesses who have been pillars of the Roy community longer than many in Roy have been alive? I'm pro-business and pro-making things good for Roy. I am anti-conforming to codes that make everything look the same. This concept is anti-business and much more. I've gone these rounds in Salt Lake City and it's ridiculous. This is a slippery slope for the city that will cause more problems in the long run. This increases time, money, and resources, as well as the increased time, expense, and resources wasted by business due to codes like this. Form-based code is already outdated before it's adopted. Who knows how a drive-through
That's just stuff I have to understand.
who knows what a business will need to improve itself as well as the city and provide citizens a proper service and experience. I am pro-business. I want new business for Roy, but Roy needs to allow them to do what they need to do. I don't mind mixed use, but the form-based code style of mixed use is not pro-business. Roy is making a huge mistake if they adopt the code with the form-based code approach and with the non-conformance rules they have. There you have it.
Okay,
Whatever
anybody?
non-compliance stuff is about, I'm not sure, but
Let me,
how that could affect businesses with making them change things.
okay, let me, would you bring the chart down, Steve, so we can kind of see where we're at in this conversation now?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, council, here's we got good input. Appreciate the input. Appreciate the residents sticking around with us to make comments on this. That's what this meeting's about. Here's what I think the takeaway is. Matt, see if I missed anything from this workshop. We're going to go ahead and entertain on the 17th a discussion that talks about the fire interlocal agreements. I'm sensing that you got a little more information that you need, so you help us with the interlocal agreements in terms of what Chief Golden talked about. For the mixed-use development discussion, what we are going to do is Randy's going to send you the questions. I'd ask you to seriously look at those questions. If we need to add something to them, please do so, but please do that. Matt will keep us posted as he's still working through the RFP process, and that hopefully we'll do that. I'm not sensing that there's anything further that you're going to need on terms of the decision on mixed use, except it was proposed that we will have one more workshop after we get the questions to discuss what's next. And having said that, again, I want to appreciate the public's input on that. There were some great comments made. I've written those down. I assume you did as well. Is there any other comments or questions the council has for today before we adjourn? Okay, not hearing anything. I, again, appreciate everybody joining us. Obviously a good discussion. Do I have a motion then to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, Councilman Paul, motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Brian gave me a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I read the lips of some of you, so obviously it's set. So we'll go ahead, enjoy your day and be safe. Thank you.
Bye.